Hey everybody, Joe Vanourney, Cherry the Geek TV. We are here at San Diego Comic-Con 2024. We are here with Marc Scott Zicree, whose Space Command Redemption is featured this weekend in a panel.
It is.
Talk to me about this Space Command Redemption. People that don't know you, you're a writer who's written for all kinds of sci-fi, Star Trek, Next Generation, Sliders,
Smurfs, He-Man,
Smurfs.
Super Friends.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Babylon 5.
So how did Space Command Redemption come about? It's an interesting story made independently.
Well, thanks, Joe. A few years ago, I was seeing that all the science fiction tended to be extremely dystopic, extremely negative. Battlestar Galactica was great, but they never had a birthday party on it, for instance. And so I wanted to do something that was hopeful and inspiring, like Star Trek had inspired me when I was a kid. I was 10 when the original Star Trek came out, and so I thought, okay, well, let's do this space-going show that says we can come together across boundaries and barriers. We can create a future worth living in. But it comes from compassion. It comes from action, and not being preachy or anything, but just saying this is in my own life. Love is the power that against evil, against darkness. You have to put it into practice. So now I'd written for all the major studios and networks over a career of many decades, and with this one, I didn't want to trust them not to either cut it off at script, cut it off at pilot, or wreck it with their notes. I didn't need to have a funny dog in it or something. And so I'd never raised money before, but I said, well, let's see if I can. And between crowdfunding and selling investment shares for $7,500 each, I was able to raise $4 million and open my own studio. And Space Command is a 12-hour series. And we've completed the first hour, Space Command Redemption, and we finished shooting the 6th hour, Space Command Forgiveness, and now we're shooting the next 2-hour story, which is called Space Command: The Great Solar War. And so it's just hugely fun.
Awesome. You put together an amazing cast in this. Yes. Not only do you have some new people,
yes,
but you've put together a group of sci-fi series legends.
It's a dream team.
Yeah, talk about some of these people.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of them were from shows I'd written for previously, like Next Gen or Babylon 5. And so I cast Mira Furlan. Sadly, we lost her during the pandemic, but she's a brilliant actress. She was Delenn in Babylon 5, Bob Picardo from Star Trek Voyager and Stargate Atlantis, and Bill Mumy, who I've known since I was 7 when Lost in Space was on the air. He's of course great in Twilight Zone and Babylon 5, and also Doug Jones, the great Doug Jones, who is, of course, in Star Trek Discovery and The Shape of Water and many other things, and Bruce Boxleitner. And so they're in the first 2 hours of the show. And since I was casting so many famous actors, fan favorites, my favorites, I thought, well, for the 2 leads, why don't we have a worldwide talent search? Anyone, anywhere in the world could audition for 2 of the lead roles, Captain Kemmer and Cadet Bradbury. And so we put out that they could download the audition sides and make their own audition, and we would look at it and seriously consider it. So we got 7,000 inquiries, 1,200 videos, and we cast 9 of our leads from those auditions.
That's awesome.
Phenomenal.
So there's a Kickstarter going on right now to
Yes.
fund pre-production of the 3rd film, the
Yes.
Space Command: Great Solar War.
Yes,
Talk
indeed.
about this Kickstarter. Where can people find it, and what are some of the perks that they would get if they
Yes.
contribute?
Well, I love the fact that now the audience can actually have a say in what gets made. Back when Star Trek needed its 3rd season, I was, as a 10-year-old, out in front of NBC holding my little sign saying, give us a 3rd season, and it worked. There was a power. But now you can actually fund the shows you want to see. And so Great Solar War is a 2-hour story in Space Command's 1st season. It stars Ethan McDowell and Bill Mumy and Bob Picardo and Doug Jones, many other wonderful actors, and so it's an anti-war piece. It's basically saying, again, the message of the show: we cannot see the other side as the enemy, as something not human. We have to recognize our common humanity, and we have to recognize war, the concept of war, as the enemy. And we have to find a way to come up with different solutions. So I think it's a very timely message.
What are some of the perks that people would get if they contribute?
Well, for anyone pledging to Space Command via our Kickstarter campaign, Space Command: Great Solar War, they can play a walk-on role, they can wear a spacesuit, they can be in the show, they can be a Space Command officer, they can get DVDs, Blu-rays, books, comic books, graphic novels, just a whole litany of things, or even a conversation with me or with some of our stars where they get to sit down and get to know us and pick our brains and learn how to be part of this amazing world that we live in creating our fantasies and making them real and sharing them them with the world.
Awesome. So what's the overall, you said you're about to start production on the third one.
Yes.
How far do you see this going?
The first season is 12 hours. So we've shot the first 6 hours. We're shooting hours 7 and 8 now. After that is a 2-hour story called Space Command Empire, which stars Armin Shimmerman and Christina Moses from A Million Little Things, and Ethan Phillips, and many of our Star Trek, our Space Command regulars. And then the final episode of the season is called Mousetrap, another 2-hour story that kind of wraps up all the threads that we've planted this first season. So it's structured as 2-hour stories with a beginning, a middle, and end, but then they all link together into a larger arc story over the season.
So Space Command's also part of this thing you've created called the Showrunners Network.
Yes.
So I'm really excited when I was hearing about this. Talk about what the concept is. What's the mission of the Showrunners Network?
Well, when I was a kid, I said to my mother, I said, "Mommy, what's megalomania?" And she described it, and I just hung on to that for dear life, And so my entire career, from when I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion on, I take on a project that's impossible to pull off. Then I pull it off, and then I choose something even harder. So with Space Command, I was able to demonstrate that I can finance from the audience a science fiction show that's on the level of all the great science fiction shows I've been part of in the past. And so now what I'm doing is creating the Showrunners Network, which is a slate of 6 science fiction series, including Space Command, that I'm creating with the creators of The Expanse, the creators of Farscape and Alienation and Sequest and Defiance. I'm talking to the Serling family about a new Rod Serling show I want to do. And it's just this incredible slate of shows that I would be dying to see, and plus a movie that we're also doing features. And so we're raising money for that now. We're selling investment shares in that for $105,000 per share. We're offering 200 shares, and we already have two people, buying in. So that's pretty amazing. And so I learned that I could raise money, which is a really fun ability to have, I got to tell you.
Awesome. I can't wait to see some of those shows. You mentioned the Twilight Zone Companion,
Yes.
and I'm dying to talk to you about that. This book, I discovered probably in junior high, probably like 1983-ish.
Yeah.
And I think that was the book I read the most. That was on my nightstand. I think I referred to that book. For you kids out there, this was before the internet. If you wanted to find out information about a show or episode guide, you had to find a book. And I think yours, and I'm going to say, I think yours was probably the gold standard of official companions for television shows. Some have come after, some are better than others. But Twilight Zone Companions, the gold standard, and it's still in print. Third printing.
We did a new edition. Yeah, we did. It's 100 pages longer. It's got 500 new photographs and links to audio and video rarities. And the reason I wanted to do it was because after I finished the book, people kept telling me stories from when they were making the Twilight Zone. The directors, the actors. I said, "Why didn't you tell me when I was doing the book?" And it's like, well, I got to put this in the book somehow. And I mean, for instance, when they were shooting Eye of the Beholder, the one with the woman whose head is wrapped in bandages, the director, Douglas Hayes, realized that they were going to run short, and Rod Serling was out of town, and they couldn't reach him. So fortunately, Doug was a writer as well as a director, and so he wrote a scene in that episode in the style of Rod Serling. And so if you ever watch it, there's a scene where the doctor and the nurse are talking in this break room, and he says, "I've looked under those bandages, it's a human face." Doug wrote that. And so when Serling came back and they were screening the cut for him, Doug was in the back of the auditorium, the screening room, like sweating bullets. And then at the end of the episode, Rod Serling just turned to him and said, "Nice scene." So wonderful stuff.
So what year did the first edition? When was
1982.
That?
So
1982.
It came out right before you read it.
So when you wrote that, 1982, did you have any idea that 43 years later, there'd still be in print and new editions?
I feel really blessed, and I wrote the book partially because I wanted to learn about it. I knew I wanted to be a writer, producer in TV, and I wanted to make great shows. And so the way you learn how to write great shows or make great shows is you study how a great show was made. And Twilight Zone was one of my favorite shows. And it was 2 years after Rod Serling died prematurely in 1975 of open heart surgery. His heart failed him. And so his house was still there. His wife was still in the house. His dog was still there. There was one room with just all the awards, the Emmys and the Golden Globes and all of that. And his attic was still there with all of his scrapbooks. And so I literally crawled through Rod Serling's attic to research that book. And the interesting thing, you weren't the only person who read it and loved it. A whole generation of teenagers read that book and decided that they would become writer-producers in television. And so there's a whole generation of showrunners, from Damon Lindelof to Ron Moore, to on and on and on. David Chase is a huge fan of The Twilight Zone. Almost all of them, their icon, their role model is Rod Serling, and it came from reading The Twilight Zone Companion, because I was in my early 20s when I wrote it, so the teenagers reading the book were not much older than me.
So there's been a lot of different iterations of the Twilight Zone since then. Some work better than others,
yes.
But none have matched the success of that original Rod Serling Twilight Zone.
No.
Why do you think that is? Is it just that the writing from Rod Serling and Charles Beaumont and George Clayton Johnson and Richard Matheson, is it just that much stronger writing, or is it just the time it was made?
It was, you know, most of the great science fiction shows have a visionary at the top. Whether it's Rod Serling or Gene Roddenberry or J. Michael Straczynski or Chris Carter with X-Files, there's someone at the top who has the vision and has the power to see it through. And I think Rod was the first of that breed. That's why we all have model ourselves after Rod, because he was the first writer to say, I'm going to run the show and I'm going to be, the buck stops with him. Prior to that, in television, the producers ran TV and the writers were subordinate to them. Rod was the first one to say, no, 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 I'm in charge. And so we got a terrific producer, Buck Houghton, and he had great taste in actors and in composers, Bernard Herrmann and Jerry Goldsmith, for God's sake, and Franz Waxman. And everything, it started with the writing, because Rod was so brilliant, such an amazing writer. And then he got this whole team of people around him. And it just, you know, it was phenomenal, week after week after week. And so the later versions, later incarnations of Twilight Zone, one of which I wrote for, they just didn't have that guy at the top who really, and it's lightning in a bottle. You know, you can't plan for that. You can hope for it, but you can never actually design it, because it'll happen or it won't.
Favorite episode?
Oh, Walking Distance, Walking Distance. I love Walking Distance. It was Rod's favorite. It's about a man who goes back to his hometown, and he finds himself in the past of his childhood. And the interesting thing about that episode was, when Rod Serling was in World War II as a paratrooper, he learned that his father had died, and he asked to be excused to go to his father's funeral. He loved his dad, and he was not allowed to. So he never got to say goodbye. And so that episode where he goes back into his past and gets to sit down with his father and talk to him and bid him farewell, that was Rod's farewell to his father. So it was a deeply personal episode, and it's gorgeous in every way.
Awesome. Where can people see Space Command?
They can see it on, they can rent it or purchase it on Google Play or Amazon Prime. They can watch it for free on Tubi with ads, or they can just hang around me and ask me, and bother me enough, and then I'll say, sit down and watch this. But it's well worth seeing. I'm so proud of it, and I am so glad that I have so many fun and incredibly talented people to work with.
Well, it's so awesome talking to you. Check out Space Command on any of those platforms, and check out the Kickstarter page for the third Space Command, and get the Twilight Zone Companion if you want to dig into that series and hear some wonderful stories about the making of that, and get some feedback on all the different episodes. Marc, thanks for chatting with us.
Joe.
And stay tuned for more coverage here at San Diego Comic-Con 2024.
Hi, I'm Marc Scott Zicree, writer, director, producer, and creator of Space Command, and I'm here in Stage 2 of Space Command Studios to tell you about what we're doing and who we are and how you can be part of it. You may know me from the hundreds of hours of TV shows I've written and produced, or the many best-selling books I've written, or my popular Mr. Sci-Fi YouTube channel, but my big project is Space Command, a 12-hour epic science fiction show that's a hopeful vision of the future. Now, thanks to crowdfunding campaigns and selling investment shares for $7,500 each, you guys have financed the first 6 hours of Space Command, which is now in the can. We've shot it. So we are now embarking on the next 2-hour Space Command story, The Great Solar War, in which our hero, Jack Kemmer, endeavors to stop a war between Earth and the outer colonies and an alien race that we've just encountered called the Passara. It stars Doug Jones, Bill Mumy, Robert Picardo, Sue Ann Peen, Ethan McDowell, Brian McClure, Victor Manso, many of our Space Command favorites. It's a big-scale story. I cannot wait to share it with you. I've bought many, many spaceship consoles, robots, spacesuits, aliens, and 2001: Space Odyssey, and Pluto Nash, and many, many other films and TV shows. So we're going to be using them in this new episode. For instance, here's this amazing console from Jonathan Frakes' Thunderbirds, and we have brought it back to life. And we are going to be using it as the fast and light drive in Space Command. But none of it happens unless you guys pledge and help us hit our goals. So we're asking for your help, as ever. This is a show I've dreamed of making since I was 10 and went on the original Star Trek set and met Nichelle Nichols, who we later, 50 years later, were able to film for Space Command. So the first 2 hours, Redemption, introduced our characters. The second 2 hours, Forgiveness, are in the works. During the pandemic, we did a bonus episode called Ripple Effect, and we also have a prequel that combines the audio play we did with our full cast and the amazing graphic novel illustrated by Tiani Farr, and we've combined them into an animatic that's just spectacular. So there are many perks. You can have walk-on roles, you can play a Space Command officer, you can play an alien, you can wear a spacesuit. There are many, many things you can do that are hugely fun. We have a big alien spaceship on stage 3 of Space Command Studios, many other joys and wonders, and you can be part of it. And it's just a dream come true for me to have all of you make this dream come true. And there's a lot more to come. Thanks a lot, guys.